to give them their food in due season. When you give to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they are filled with good things. When you send forth your spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground. May the glory of the Lord endure forever. May the Lord rejoice in his works. We have a beautiful work of God's hands near Galilee, and I understand one of the versions of the story that I heard from the daughter of the first pastor on the phone. I met her on the phone only. She said she had one of those Good News Bibles, and it had a map in it, and she opened it up, and there was the Sea of Galilee around the same time they were thinking about what to name the church. So one of several stories I've heard about how Galilee got its name is that Lake McCarrons felt like the Sea of Galilee. And of course, Galilee is where Jesus walked on the water, where he did the miracle with a multitude of fish, where he appeared as risen Christ along the shores of Galilee. It's where he calmed the storm. It's where he called the fishermen. And from the mount, up from the Sea of Galilee, he gave the Sermon on the Mount. So, and it's the name of our church. But we have a really beautiful, so those are the stories of Christ and miracles, but down to earth science. Let's learn about Lake McCarrons tonight, because we have an expert on Lake McCarrons with us, and her name is Amy Myrbo. And Amy and I went to school together since we were little.
Oh.
Yeah, welcome, Amy.
First grade little.
First grade, that's right.
Well, thank you so much for bringing me here. Even though we're all in our own little places, we're together, and I'm happy that the technology, it's not like being there really together, but it's a good substitute anyway. So thank you. Would you like to just chat first? Should I just show a couple things? I don't have a presentation. I figured that this was not like a PowerPoint kind of.
I have some questions for you.
Please.
Oh, by the way,
I have a few pictures.
Mm-hmm. Elaine, are you there? Yay, I see Elaine and Tom and Miriam and Steve Listen and Joyce and Lori. They have more history and life experience on Lake McCarrons than I do.
Wonderful.
Because I'm a newbie. I've just been at Galilee 5 years, but these cloud of witnesses here are very, especially Lori, growing up right on the lake, this beautiful lake.
Wonderful, it is.
Close to it.
Yeah, and Amy knows about geology and the history, the bazillion-year-long old history of Lake McCarrons.
That's right.
And and if you go to the Science Museum of Minnesota today, we can't today. I just went there the day before it closed, and you can see an exhibit that is Amy's exhibit about how she tests putting kind of like a pipe deep into the depths of the lake, way down into the ground of the lake, way down, and pulls up samples and can tell the history of before there were people there, the history of the lake, I think, right, Amy?
Yeah, so that's exactly right.
Tell us. Yeah. And you have scientists surrounding you too, so we'll have good questions for you.
Excellent. And please do, I mentioned that there's a little like speech bubble down at the very bottom of your screen that says chat, and feel free to type things in there if you want, but also to interrupt me and ask questions. So, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So I know you all have a history of at least a few years with the lake, and maybe very many years. I'm really interested in how people, when they come to live around a lake, whether they're just building a house, or they have a farm, or they have a lawn, or things like that, how people affect the lake, and how we can learn from the mud at the bottom of the lake what happened and when it happened. McCarrons, you probably know, has had some ups and downs. It has been, a clean lake, a dirtier lake. People have spent a huge amount of time and resources trying to protect it and restore it. And so one of the ways we can tell sort of what was a big impact, what was a small impact, is to take a core sample of the mud at the bottom of the lake. And this is something that I learned to do at the University of Minnesota in the geology department. So I got my PhD there, but before that, I was an English major at the U. And so I have kind of the two sides of the brain or something. So I'm really interested in the history and how we can learn about that. I wanted to show you first, I think, a picture of this core sample. And this is the same picture that you can see at the Science Museum. Hopefully it opens up again, sometime. This exhibit that Dana mentioned is supposed to be up through Labor Day. So I should say that where I work now is at a place called the St. Croix Watershed Research Station, which is a part of the Science Museum of Minnesota. It's a small research group that studies lakes out in Marine on St. Croix, right on the St. Croix River. So I'm very lucky to get to go out there. And so because we're part of the Science Museum, that's why we get an exhibit about us and about how we take core samples and water samples and try to protect the lakes of Minnesota and lakes around the world. So I'm going to try to do something here that is sharing my screen with you. And who knows what you're going to see, but okay, can you see that?
Not yet.
Mm-mm.
Tall and skinny?
Yeah,
Tall and skinny.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so you can ignore the white part. Let's see if I can just zoom in low. Interesting. Okay, so what this is a photograph of a core sample from Lake McCarrons. And so what we do is we go out either on the ice when the lake is frozen. Did it ice out already? Is the ice off the lake?
I don't know.
I think it might be, but I'm not 100% positive.
Uh-huh. I love I try to get out there when the ice is going out because it starts to make these little candle shapes. The ice starts to and then they float around and they jingle with each other, and it's incredible. Which is apparently was the inspiration for the Anishinaabe jingle dresses.
You're kidding. I didn't know that.
That's what a Anishinaabe friend of mine told me. So
Wow.
it's an amazing sound. So we go out on the ice or we go out in boats and we basically stick a pipe down into the mud and then pull it back up. And then we take the cores back to the lab and do various things with them. But the first thing we do is take photographs of them. And so I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but this is in sort of life position. So the bottom is the older part, right? Deposited first. There's a little card down there that has colored chips on it. That's something that they use at the lab to make sure that it's a photography thing. So to be sure that we have a standard in the photos. And you can see that about halfway up the core sample, it starts to look pretty different. It starts to have stripes. And actually a little bit below that, so you can see my mouse, I think. So here's where the stripes kind of start, and we'll zoom in. But then down here, it is when it starts to kind of turn black. And so we've done some radiometric dating using a couple of isotopes on this, and we think that here where it starts to turn black is when the McCarrons dairy farm began on the lake. So that was the first European impact to the lake. And what it did was fertilize the lake, right? Cow poop going into the lake. And so more algae were able to grow. And so that's why it looks kind of blacker there. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see how beautiful this really is. And we can actually zoom way in and just see an incredible amount of detail here. And so geologists know from various things that each one of these layers, so the light colored layers are stuff that forms in the lake in the summer, so certain kinds of algae, and then a mineral called calcite that precipitates in the lake and sinks down to the bottom. So that's the light colored layer, so that's summer. And then in the winter, when the lake is iced over, all of that really fine stuff, all of the algae and the clay and all of that stuff sinks down to the bottom and makes the dark colored layer. And so these are called varves, V-A-R-V-E-S, and they, we can count back the years. And then because we can do that, we could sample a single year and see kind of what was happening in that year, because every time something changes around the lake or in the climate, so say people start building lots of houses and the erosion happens because of ground disturbance, or people are fertilizing lawns and that fertilizer goes into the lake or something like that, that changes things about the lake. And all of that stuff, all of the parts of plants that come in from the land, all of the critters that live in the lake and the algae, all of that stuff is recorded down in the mud. I'm going to stop there for a second and just ask if anybody has questions so far. And I'm just going to scroll through this because it's so beautiful.
How far do you do your test? How deep?
As deep as we can. So McCarrons is a little bit challenging because it's a pretty deep lake. And because when we try to anchor, you can't see me well, no, you can, I guess. It's really hard to anchor securely, which you have to do to go down. So we like to core it in the winter. And so the rule of thumb in Minnesota lakes is that every year about 1 millimeter of mud accumulates in the lake. I don't know what that is in metric, but it's like a 16th of an inch or something like that. And so that's 1 millimeter. So for every meter is 1,000 years. These lakes have been around. They were formed by the glaciers at the end of the last at the end of the last ice age. And so they are about 10 or 11,000 years old. And so there's 10 or 11 or 12 or 15 meters of mud down there that we can collect. And so what is that? That's 13 meters is about 40 feet, a little bit more. So it's substantial.
Wow.
So do you have all that? And we're just seeing a part of it?
We're just seeing a part of it. We're seeing the very beautiful, very sort of 20th century, mostly 19th and 20th century part.
I gotcha.
Yeah, McCarrons is great. I mean, it's such an easy lake to get to, and so a lot of schools, St. Thomas and McAllister and some other schools in the university use it for their classes also.
So how can you tell which ones are the healthiest years? Is there certain things you look for?
Yeah. So let's see if we can zoom out a little bit. Well, it doesn't matter. So yeah, we can see a little bit of context here. So So here's the beginning of the dairy farm down here around 74. And then counting, so I'll go all the way up to the top and just show you something. So this white layer here is just a crack. So that's not anything. This is a core sample that was actually taken frozen for various reasons that I won't get into, but so that's just a crack. Do you have any guesses as to what this white layer is? That's probably about 10 years from the top. Something that happened in 2004 to the lake.
2004.
They did an alum treatment. So they did a treatment of the lake to try to clean it up, essentially, they pump something called, it's aluminum sulfate, it's alum. I always think there's a Bugs Bunny cartoon where he eats alum. But it makes his mouth shrink all up. Anyway, they did this to try to clean up the lake, and it worked. They're thinking about doing it again because it only works for a certain amount of time. But so I think this core was taken in about 2014, and so you can kind of count back there. And so this is 2004, and then counting back. You kind of notice, I think my eye was always drawn to this set of layers right here. They're kind of thicker and they are a little bit sandy, and that is because they are from the late 20s and early 30s when a beach was established, the beach that still exists, but it was a much more popular place at the time. So, of course, the beach wasn't sandy naturally. So most of our Minnesota lakes are pretty muddy on the shores and not, beautiful Florida beaches. And so when I was working on my research for my dissertation, I went to the Minnesota Historical Society and got some of their records, and they actually have the minutes of the lake, so the beach association meeting, like the board of the beach. And so they would have written down, the beach was opened in 1926. They would say 1927, 5 tons of sand bought for $25 or something. And then 1928, 3 more tons of sand and they kept putting sand on and sand on. And so some of that was washing out into the lake. And you can see that by these layers that are a little bit thicker. And we can tell from testing that we did that they have more mineral stuff, right? They have more sand in there.
Wow. Wow.
And I think it's just incredibly beautiful. These are some gas bubbles because the lake it's kind of gassy.
Isn't it a spring-fed lake?
Yeah, and it does have a little bit of it has groundwater coming into it, and then of course the stream that comes in at the whatever kind of the northwest corner, coming through the wetlands. So, but yeah, there's a lot of groundwater or springs that come into the lake also.
Where in the lake are those core samples usually taken?
That is a great question. We usually take them in the deepest part or farthest away from any land, just so we have something that, an area that's kind of integrating the processes in the whole lake without being influenced by, say, right where the stream is coming in or close to the beach or something. So we usually take them in the deepest part.
Wow. Fascinating.
Is it the deepest lake in the Twin Cities?
It is not. It is, for its size, it might be. Because it's a teeny little lake. It's about 16 meters deep. The chain of lakes, both Harriet and Bide-Makaska, are about 30 meters, so 100 feet.
Okay.
We're actually, and that's a great segue into, I'll show you these first. Oh my gosh. Okay. I want to show you one other thing before. Okay, so this I just think is incredible. So this is from, I don't know what year, maybe 1931 or 28. So this was the beach on Lake McCarrons at that time. So you can see so many people and so much activity like this. So this is clearly a pre-litigation society, right? This is
No social distancing, that's for
no,
sure.
and no social distancing. And it looks like a lot of fun, doesn't it?
It does.
So
I'm
this
kind of jealous.
this like 3-story platform. You can see another dock in the back. And in the lower left, you can see this toboggan slide that you could ride down apparently into the lake. There was a dance hall on the shores. There were some other buildings. It was just really a center for people, pre-air conditioning and a place for people to be able to go. And this is, I just love this picture because it's just, from around that same time. You can see the cars in the background. It's just, they look like people we know.
Amy, we might know these people.
Yeah, that's right.
George Johnson is 93, and
Okay.
in the nursing home where he is,
Yeah,
he has a picture of his car, and it looks like one of those.
nice.
And
Well,
I don't want to talk about people, but
I was gonna say, George and Gloria live on the opposite end of the lake from the beach.
Okay.
And they would swim, I would babysit their children, and they would swim down at right off their land.
Yeah.
wow.
It's just such a beautiful place. Now I'm missing one picture that I thought I had, so you're gonna have to bear with me for just a second.
I had no idea it was such a popular place.
Yeah, I know. When I first saw that, I just thought, well, and I'll tell one other little story is that I from the minutes from the meetings of this board of that organized the beach, they had the receipts for every year, how much they took in for renting towels and lockers and swimsuits.
Wow.
And it was like, it was a nickel for each of them. And so based on those receipts, you could calculate about like a minimum of how many people came to the lake every year, right? If assuming that like everybody rented all those things, which of course they didn't, that gives you a minimum. And it's an amazing number of people. It's hundreds of thousands of people probably in the lake every year. And it's, people still swim there, but it's nothing like that. And then you can actually do a calculation of if that many people swam in the lake, would they input nutrients to the lake from maybe peeing in the lake if they, and that turns out to be a lot too. So I just wanted to show you, this is, someone said something about feeling connected to the rest of the world, going outside and being together. This, I want to put Lake McCarrons in context of how it's formed and how it fits into all the rest of the lakes. Because we have, especially in the north part of St. Paul, we have a ton of lakes, and they're all over the place. And so there are reasons why they are where they are and why they're McCarrons especially, but some of the other lakes are small and deep. And so to orient you, there's a Minnesota down there, and we're looking at this box. So here's the Wisconsin border, and the white blobs that you see are all the lakes and rivers.
I don't see that image.
Oh,
We
no.
are just seeing the picture.
Oh, well,
Of
that.
the bathing suit.
I've seen the beach beauties.
Oh, wait, hang on. Maybe. Do you see a picture now? A map?
The 3-story.
Dang. Okay, I'm going to try it again. Oh, screen sharing is, okay. Today I learned a thing about Zoom. Here we go, trying it again. Oh, and the ice is out. Okay. There.
Bill
Okay.
Johnson. Hi, Bill Johnson. That's cool. Wow, somebody called Bill on the phone? Cool.
Okay, do you see a map now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for telling me. I could have gone on and on. So you see where we are in Minnesota, here, in the Twin Cities. Here's White Bear Lake, the Wisconsin border. And so the white blobs that you see are all of the lakes and rivers. The gray kind of shading, gray and black shading in the background is how deep the bedrock is below the surface. So we know that there's maybe 30 to 100 feet of glacial material on top of the bedrock, because the glaciers, plowed everything up here. And so this is based on all sorts of data, and what it's doing is showing these black channels. So these are former valleys of the Mississippi River and of the Minnesota River. Can you see these kind of spidery black shapes? So those are deeper than the gray, right? So they're old river channels. And if I zoom in a little bit, which I hope I can do, it's all of a sudden a different program. Oh my God. Oh, why would you do that? Can you still see it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Oh, sorry, I got this open in a different program and I want to zoom in.
Thank you, Lori.
Wow. Dana, you're going to have to take over for a second and talk, because I'm going to try to figure something out here.
Oh, I can do that.
I know we're
How's
almost
everybody
done.
doing? Oh, I'm just so grateful. I can't figure out how to host a meeting with Zoom, but I can just click into one. So I really appreciate you doing this. And I didn't realize how homesick I was for my church brothers and sisters until I see your faces. So thank you so much, everyone who's able to click on live, and we'll get to share this later. I had no idea that the rivers.
So can you see this now?
We can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So
looks like veins and capillaries all over.
It does, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And you can start to see that the lake. So I think the easiest example to see is, so here, this is from a field trip I led. So here's the Minneapolis chain of lakes down here in this oval. And you can see that they're all in a valley. And this is not a valley you can see on the surface. This is a valley deep in the bedrock. And that valley goes up through Worth Lake and Sweeney Lake and the lakes up here. And once you start seeing that, you can see lots of lakes. Medicine Lake over here in the west is in a channel, and all of the lakes over here in St. Paul, including McCarrons, which is right here by this letter B. A lot of them are in these channels. And this...
On my screen, your mouse isn't moving.
Okay. Do you see the big B in the middle? No?
I see the field trip circle.
Okay, but you're
not...
Oh,
now your mouse is moving.
Okay, but you're not zooming in with me. Okay, one more time.
Ah, yes.
Okay. So I was just pointing out, the chain of lakes is in this valley, Medicine Lake over here. Now my mouse is moving?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So go over to McCarrons here. And so a lot of these lakes, right? Phelan, Sweeney, Owasso, um, Vadnais, all of these lakes are in these chains. And this, when the glaciers were all done, when they were melting back, they didn't just melt at the end and melt all the way back to Canada. Glaciers are they're a big combination of ice, but also rocks and soil and all of this stuff. And they kind of started melting in place and left, the glaciers were almost a mile thick in Minnesota. And so they left these huge blocks of ice kind of buried in rocks and dirt and all of this stuff. And when that ice melted, those depressions became lakes. And especially when those big blocks of ice could be left in the valleys, then those lakes were particularly deep and particularly small. And that's what makes them super cool and interesting and wonderful to geologists. And so I was just thinking about this today as, this is little McCarrons that's, means so much to me and to some of you. And it fits into this bigger picture of, the way and why Earth is the way it is. And I just think it just feels to me like it connects me to this place. So I could go on and on, but I've used up my time. So I'm happy to take any questions or to just, shut up.
What's causing any pollution in the lake? Or why do they need to clean it up again with the aluminum, whatever?
So there's a lot of, McCarrons drains, there's a lot of water comes into that wetland system that's at the northwest end of the lake and flows into the lake. And so there's highways and streets and people's lawns and people's dog poop and lots of stuff that, over many years leaches down into the lake. And so that source they've tried to clean up by putting that wetland system in there to try to have things settle out before it goes in. But there's something that's kind of chemically complicated, but you can stop the nutrients from coming into the lake from the outside. But there are certain processes in lakes like McCarrons that means that the mud keeps giving back nutrients, phosphorus in particular. And so even if you do your best to clean up the lake and to stop all of the pollution coming into the lake, it can kind of last for a lot longer. So the alum treatment is to prevent that phosphorus from coming out of the mud and fertilizing more algae. And they have to do it again because it just doesn't last all that long. It kind of acts as a cap, as a barrier, but then more mud accumulates on top of it, and then that mud starts to release phosphorus.
Huh. Thank you.
Yeah, I know you can't see what I'm.
Is that always been true, or is that just since you met a larger population of people?
So we know from coring almost to the very, very bottom of the mud in this lake that that those layers, so the fact that we preserve those beautiful layers in the lake means that there's no oxygen at the bottom of the lake. So when we see those layers, it means there aren't critters, little larvae of insects and zooplankton and things, and worms stirring up the mud. And McCarrons has those layers on and off going way back 10,000 years. And so it has probably been a pretty nutrient-rich lake for all of that time, but certainly human impacts have made it much, much more so.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for the questions.
10,000 years. Wow.
10,000 years.
Wow. Jesus only was on Sea of Galilee 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
We're talking about 10,000 years ago.
10,000 years. And these, I mean, these layers that you, or these, sorry, not the layers, these channels, right? These old river channels, these black stripes, hundreds of thousands of years, right? Because they're probably from the last time we were in between glacial periods. And so that's 110,000 years ago, and then 100,000 years before that, and 100,000 years before that. So it's pretty mind-boggling.
I read there was a, oops.
No,
Go ahead.
I'm just asking questions because.
good. I'm being social. Hi,
Isn't there-
Peter.
wasn't there-
Peter's
wasn't-
there, and he's another.
How
new
long
event
ago
graduate.
was this? Well,
Oh, here.
but this doesn't have to do with Lake McCarrons, I guess. But I
That's
mean,
okay.
there's
Might know.
ancient lakes, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
Anoka Lake or Anoka.
Yeah, right. Glacial Lake Anoka. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
So
that-
these lakes that, yeah, huge lakes,
right.
with glaciers, yeah, all around them.
Okay,
Yeah.
but that's
so,
not part of McCarrons.
it's not. It's a little bit north. I guess it would be. So let's see. The lake's up here. I'm looking for. Oh no, maybe I don't have it quite high enough. There's a couple lakes. Oh no, here they are. Can you still see my mouse moving?
Yep.
So that Glacial Lake Anoka was kind of around this area. There's, and it, when the glaciers melted and with the lake there, it left the Anoka sand plain. So if you dig into the soil in, Isanti County, Anoka County, it's very, very sandy soil. And
Right.
that's all because the glaciers, when they were melting, they like washed all the fine grain stuff, all the clay and silt downstream, and all that sand was just sorted right into place there. So that was, yeah, I don't know the exact extent, but that was a big one. And then there are lakes that existed millions of years ago out in the western part of the US where the glaciers haven't bulldozed it all over. So we can go out and look at those lakes as actual outcrops. So they've become, what we call lithified. They've totally become rocks. And then streams have cut down through them and exposed, or people have done road cuts, building roads and cutting through the rock. And so we can go out and look at the lakes that way and don't have to take cores.
Nice.
Well, I really appreciate all of your questions. Dana, you're muted.
Amy, this is fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
I never ever knew that never knew about these deep crevices that were ancient river
Yeah.
paths. And I always thought only the boundary waters look like this. I didn't know
Yeah.
here in the metro area, there's this many lakes. That's
Right here, we're very
cool.
lucky. And this whole part, I mean, McCarrons is almost the most southern of them, but you get up here into Forest Lake and White Bear Lake, and it's just really an incredible part of the world.
Wow. I had no idea. I don't know if Ronald Peterson is still on. He's a scientist too.
Oh yeah?
Ask a really hard question, Ron. Can you hear me?
Come on, Ron. We're expecting something. You're muted.
No, it doesn't look like he's muted. We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Can you type a hard question? It's okay. It's okay. You don't have to ask a hard question.
Yeah, I always have trouble with my microphone. That looks like you might be having trouble with your microphone too.
Okay.
I don't
He's
know.
just trying to get out of a question.
By the way,
Right.
do you see where Joyce is? Joyce is up there. That's her husband, Peter. He graduated from the University of Minnesota
Hi, Peter.
last year.
Oh, congratulations.
Come tell us, Peter. It's the coolest thing ever. If you're
Looks like
over,
you're wearing your maroon and gold sweatshirt.
yeah, if you're over like
Not to put you on the
certain
spot,
age,
Peter, but you're on
you
the
can
spot.
take classes for like $50, and he did an entire history degree,
Oh, so
right?
When you're older than dirt, you can take a class for $10 a credit.
Oh my gosh.
But he studied, he did it for fun. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a huge commitment.
That's
And he
very
just
cool.
graduated last year.
He said he's glad he graduated last year instead of this year.
Oh, because you wouldn't have gotten to walk. Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, those kids are really missing that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Older than the bottom of a core sample.
That's
There you go.
older than
Or- Wow. I have something to talk with next time I see George. I want to ask him more questions about the lake.
yeah, and I mean I would always be happy to correspond, or
Great.
that's all we do nowadays is just correspond.
We have our confirmation class is doing some work on the watersheds,
Yeah.
and there's a pond up by the church that I think eventually drains into the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have any suggestions about things we might be able to do or see that the kids would be
Whew. I mean, I think
interested in?
I don't know if it's a stormwater pond or something, but there are some good resources out there for collecting invertebrates, for collecting, bugs and critters
Okay.
from the lakes, that you can kind of tell some stuff about the health of the waters from what's there. You can actually take some PVC pipe or something if the lake is shallow enough, and you can actually go kind of push it down and pull up a core sample and kind of poop it out on the shore and look at it that way. There are things like the temperature and pH of the water, and I really think the invertebrates and even maybe some of the plants are some of the most interesting things.
Okay.
Since you've mentioned watersheds, so you probably know that Lake McCarrons is in the Capital Region Watershed District, and they're a very active and wonderful watershed district, and I bet they would also have some activities and suggestions.
Yeah, we're working with somebody, so she's been really good.
Great. Do you know who it is?
Heidi Ferris.
Okay, who I don't know, but I know
Yes.
some of the people.
And directly with the Capital Region Watershed.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, they have a really cool new headquarters in the Midway, right where I grew up.
Hey, yeah. Hey.
Ron has typed a question.
Oh, where's the chat?
What is under the black? Am I muted? What is under the black area in the core sample? Why no layers?
Yeah, so this is where I need you to be able to see me drawing things. So the lakes in Minnesota typically in the summer, the lake's ice out and the water's all cold. But as the sun beats down on the surface water, that the water in the surface of the lake gets warm. And the wind mixes it, and it becomes this layer of warm water, but it doesn't mix with the water on the bottom, which is colder and denser because the wind just can't mix it that deep. And so that happens, it's called stratification in the summer. So if you've swum out in the lake and you stick your foot down and you feel a cold layer, that's what that is. The surface water is warm and the bottom water is cold. And then in the fall, the surface water cools down and then it's about the same density and it can all mix again. And then it ices over and then it mixes again in the spring before it starts to stratify. And that mixing restores oxygen to the bottom of the lake. because all the oxygen in the bottom tends to get used up by decomposition of the algae that are sinking down. And so that the mixing of the lake restores oxygen to the bottom. So fish can live and things like that, and critters can dig around in the sediment. But in some lakes, they don't mix every year. And so that water, bottom water, and that's for reasons of this shape and size. Typically, if a lake is very small, the wind can't mix it very deeply. And so if the lake is too deep, then the bottom water stays stratified. Also, road salt, when it goes into the lake, makes that bottom water denser, and it can keep it from stratifying or from mixing. Okay, so in most lakes, there's oxygen in the bottom waters. And so most lakes don't have those pretty stripes in the sediment. Most lakes, things still settle in layers and in seasons, but the critters stir it all up, right? There are critters who are living on the mud and digging down into the mud to make their living, eating stuff, and they stir up all the layers. But if there's no oxygen at the bottoms of the lake, then those critters can't live there, and then the layers are preserved.
Wow.
So it's this balance of productivity of algae growing in the surface water, oxygen in the bottom water, the shape of the lake, the depth of the lake, the amount of wind on the lake. It's kind of a long story, but basically, yeah, it's because the layers are there because there was no oxygen at the bottom of the lake. So if you see no layers, that means the lake was well oxygenated and probably no fish kills and yeah, lower nutrients.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, that was a, whew.
I think Ron approves. Let's see what he says.
I should share with you a paper that I wrote on about this Lake McCarrons study. So I'll send that to, I don't know if I should send it out to everybody on that email list. I'll just send it out to Dana and she can share it.
Thanks,
But
Amy.
I'm
That's
happy
really nice.
I'm happy to share these pictures too. The Historical Society, so something to do on a quarantine-y kind of day, is to look at the Historical Society's online photograph archive.
Huh.
It's incredible. And this, so that's where I got the photos that I showed. There are lots more. Type in, you can search for your favorite place and find some really interesting stuff.
Oh, that's exciting.
Ron's got another question.
Oh, Ron, thanks. Chat.
When you have gone deeper, what do you see?
Yeah, so we see sometimes there are layers and sometimes there aren't. And that might have to do with whether the climate was colder and windier or warmer and drier or things like that. And so we can look at those, whether it's laminated, layered or not. We also look at a bunch of, basically everything. So that mud is made of tiny fossils, mineral grains, pollen grains, little pieces of plants, and every single one of those things tells us a story about the lake. So what kind of algae were growing there at the time? What kind of trees were growing around? What kind of minerals were forming? How much erosion, right? So every little piece of that core sample tells us something. And so we can say, this is what the vegetation was like around the lake 5,000 years ago. And so that kind of vegetation grows in a certain kind of climate. And so that's probably what the climate was like.
Wow.
It's the best. I like it.
That's very exciting. Awesome. Thank you, Amy. I'm abusing your time now, I think.
No,
I want to just keep you here forever.
I'm always happy.
This is so great. Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
It looks like Ron's on a roll.
Oh, great.
Oh, very cool.
When you have gone deeper, what do you see? Oh, he said, very cool.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. God bless you, everybody. Well, I was going to close with the last half of the song, but I don't want to but that was a great, maybe we end on that great note. That was Amy Myrbo talking about Lake McCarrons, I think.
Oh, I would like to hear you sing more.
Yes, please, a
You guys
song.
talk among yourselves so I can type the words so you can sing with me.
So much pressure.
I know. What are we going to talk about?
Uh-huh.
Well, I don't
Ron
think
and-
you want me to sing with them.
I'm just
Ron and Miriam, how can
go ahead.
Ron's is our IT specialist, and he's the one who can't figure it out.
That's right. Ron,
I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why
I
it's
just
not
have
working. He says.
dickens of the time turning my microphone on. Sometimes there's one of the function keys or something. No. Okay, are we ready?
Almost.
And luckily it's a recording, so you can like play that whole crazy long thing that I said.
Good. That's good. Amy, it was really important. You're excellent. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you everyone who was able to join in. What a surprise. Awesome.
Yeah, it was fun.
Great and mighty are you, O faithful one. Strong is your justice, strong your love. As you promised to Sarah and Abraham, kindness forevermore. My soul proclaims your greatness, O God, and my spirit rejoices in you. You have looked with love on your servant here and blessed me all my life through. Wow, we did a Lenten soup supper 3 weeks late, but worth it. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. And those who will see it later, I'm sorry to Joanne and Teresa and Lori who sing this really professionally. But anyway, enough about that. Amy Myrbo, do you have a website?
Yeah.
Or we should go to the Science Museum as soon as it opens.
Yeah, maybe I'll send you a couple pictures from that too. But yeah, I'll send you something. I don't have a whole lot, but you can Google me and you can find my past exploits, I'm sure. I don't
Awesome.
think
Tom and Elaine, I don't know if you know this, but Amy even went to Huancayo, Peru, and sampled the lakes there, and Central America, all over the world.
and I gave a talk in Spanish, which was one of my great challenges. I'm very proud of.
Miriam
Nice.
over here is a Spanish teacher from Como High School.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So
Como. Yeah.
Wow. God bless you, everyone. Thank you for coming, everyone, and those who will see it in the future.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.